Gracie Jiu Jitsu rocks. Welcome to the Gracie Jiu Jitsu Rocks podcast, a podcast dedicated to Gracie Jiu Jitsu and all things Gracie, including self-defense, competition, anti-bullying, women's self-defense and empowerment, nutrition, and most especially, the people involved in Gracie Jiu Jitsu. This podcast is for the average Joe. It's for anyone who practices, trains, teaches, or just loves to talk about or hear about Gracie Jiu Jitsu. We'll explore the lives of Gracie Jiu Jitsu practitioners, how they got involved in the art, and what effect it's had on their lives. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. Welcome to episode 85 of the Gracie Jiu Jitsu Rocks podcast. As always, I'm your host, Marty Josie, and thanks for listening. Today, my guest will be Victoria Gracie. But before we get to that, let's do a quick quote. If you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. And that's from the Dalai Lama. Okay, Victoria Gracie is a former professional dancer, model, and actress. She now focuses on raising awareness and teaching mindful parenting through her organization, My Kinda Mama. She's also a Gracie Jiu Jitsu instructor involved in the Women Empowered program. Her latest project is a children's book entitled Kip and the Magic Belt, which is being released today, and we're going to talk about that, among other things, in this interview. Victoria is such an interesting and insightful person, and I know you're going to really enjoy this interview. So without further ado, let's talk to Victoria now. Okay, I'm speaking with Victoria Gracie. So welcome to the show, Victoria.
Thank you so much, Marty. Good morning.
Good morning. And today is a very exciting day for you. Your new book, Kip and the Magical Belt, is launching today.
Yes, it is. And I'm really excited. It's the world's first ever Jiu-Jitsu kids picture book. It's one of a kind.
Wow. So tell us all about the book. How long have you been working on it? How did it come about and everything else?
If you want to know the gritty details, I actually... my husband, Hidon Gracie, is an avid napper, and he has a really ability to go, hey, okay, let's take a nap, and we'll lay down for a minute, and the minute I look at him, he's already asleep.
Oh, my gosh.
It's instantaneous, yeah, and I'm like, okay, lovely, good night. And
I can't tell you how much I admire that skill, by the way.
Me too, 5,000%.
Right.
So I remember him falling asleep, and not too shortly after, I still couldn't sleep. And I decided to pull out my phone, and I started to just write a story. And the story, of course, was inspired by the person sleeping next to me, who I was incredibly jealous of. And it ended up being about a boy who, is adjusting to a new environment and goes to a new school, only to find that the school bully decides to choose him, and he doesn't really know how to handle it. So he comes home and finds that his belt, a family heirloom, comes to life and teaches him how to defend himself using him and his stuffed bear. And by the end of the book, you see he goes through different challenges, and the bullying kind of gets worse. And so he finds a way to utilize that self-defense knowledge that the belt instills in him or brings out of him. And yeah, that's the basic premise of the book. And it's cool because, there's a lot of parallels to our bully-proof program here at the Academy. And we are really proud of a lot of what it's done for a lot of kids. So I said, how can we get this into book form so that, people can digest it a little better than, yes, come take your son to do MMA. It's like, no, that's not necessarily what we're offering.
Right. Definitely a different approach.
Yeah.
And I got to say, I admire you for writing this, and I love this. Bullying is such a huge, huge problem, as we all know, and anything that we can do to help address that is awesome. So good for you for finding that kind of gap and finding a creative and fun way to do it, and giving parents a way to really interact. The book also has a parent page, right?
Yeah, so that's the best part about it at the end. I call it the parent page, a discussion on bullying. And it begins with the understanding that, all relationships in a child's world begin with a reflection of the relationships they have with their parents and any caregivers around them. So it talks about building trust and communication to allow just their ability to speak freely to you if something does happen to them. It discusses identifying problematic behavior, which is kind of when it starts really young, believe it or not. It's like 2 or 3, they start to pull things from the kids' hands, and we intervene so quickly that they don't receive the ability to see how what they're doing affects another child. So when a kid, wants to play with a toy, we interject and go, oh, share, or we impose some sort of belief or take turns or whatever arbitrary rule we want to put on top of it. Instead of let them take the toy, let them see the kid cry, let them feel what it's like to be on the receiving end of a crying situation or retaliation. And I'm not saying you should let children just go at it and go crazy, but you should definitely come to their level and help them identify, hey, that's hurting him. This is what that's called. It's creating empathy. And I go into discussing modeling behavior, teaching how to teach empathy, how to support children who are being bullied or having big emotions beforehand, or not understanding boundaries, exposure to boundaries, setting boundaries, and then last and most importantly, I believe, is exposure to violence. How much violence are we exposing them to? I've had a parent, Marty, who literally messaged me, and they were like, so I let my kid watch the UFC every Saturday night.
Wow.
And I was like, how old's your kid? He's like 3. I was like, okay.
Oh my God.
And I was like, all right. He's like, but I'm having some problems because now this child is wanting to practice UFC and all the kids at the park. And I'm like, okay.
Gee, wonder why that happened, right?
Yeah. It's something that sometimes we don't really stop and sit back and reflect, what are the thoughts that are going through our child's head when they're embarking upon this journey of learning, and what are they intaking? Because they have 3, 4, 5-year-old logic. It's not like, oh, this is just a TV show. This is just for fun or for work, really. Right. And they start to learn. We emulate things that we see. And that's why, I beg the question, does TV emulate reality anymore, or is reality now switched over and just emulating television and the dramas that we create and the friction that is curated for us?
Yeah, I was wondering that when a lot of the crazy shows like Springer got big, a while back, or any of those type shows, because if people sit around and watch those, it makes it seem like they're, reflecting society, and any number of people could come on the show at any time and be on it. But it gets to where you watch that all the time and you think that's what society's like and that's what the world's like. But it's like, okay, how much are we being, I don't watch Springer, but you know what I mean? How much are we being socialized by that belief and that view? Yeah,
or even further, romanticized to think that every rom-com is how our love life should be. That's so unfair. It's not realistic if it doesn't innately come from a man who wants to authentically do these things, or woman. Then how can you say, well, this is what men are supposed to do? Buy me flowers, take me here, give me chocolates, or fill in the blank.
Exactly.
It's creating expectations that are thus leaving people pretty upset.
Another example is with the sitcoms. If you listen to the dialogue, it's back and forth, just kind of slamming each other and ragging on each other. And if everybody's talked like that, I wouldn't like it in my household, that's for sure.
Yeah, I remember I was trained in Meisner in an acting school, and their whole premise is to say and think, what are they doing? How do I feel about it? And react on that. And it's a very primitive, just roar at somebody.
Right.
And it makes for great, great acting, because you're really getting the escalating volcano of emotions and reactivity. Mm-hmm. But that is not what life is normally like, or should normally be like, I suppose. It's, think about it, let it sit. How does it hit you? How do you feel?
Yeah.
past the emotion. It's gaining some sort of emotional intelligence, which is what I hope my book and my goal is to write future books, is to create a opportunity and a communication for giving and emoting emotional intelligence, helping kids understand what are these big emotions happening, why are they happening, why am I being bullied? Like, is it me, or is it because they lack? Is it because they are hurt or bullied themselves? And those are questions that will not only be posed by this one, but future ones that are coming.
Mm-hmm. Well, like you just said with the acting, instead of just the pure emotion of kind of being triggered in the moment and you're reacting, going back to that and applying it here, helping kids look beyond that and having the awareness, and how does this make me feel? How does this affect people around me? Not only my behaviors, but my actions. So that's great. It's great. In keeping with this, parenting's a big deal. And I know you've got your company and your organization, My Kind of Mama, which helps families create harmonious households with mindful parenting. I really, really love that, because I believe, dysfunction is kind of rampant in our society. And I don't think people set out to be, dysfunctional parents or things like that. I think people are well-intended, but I think they just, we end up kind of passing down what we learned, and has a profound impact. So I think until that cycle of dysfunction is recognized and broken, then it's going to keep perpetuating itself. And it's got to start with awareness. And I think you and the work you're doing in My Kind of Mama and this book helps get into all that,
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate your appreciation of it. I do it because it's meaningful for me, of course, and there are definitely people resistant to the idea that mindful parenting is possible, beneficial, or important. And I find that the resistance to it usually stems from some sort of want to control. And that's what I feel generationally. Young kids start out free, sovereign little spirits, and then a parent begins to impose, no, we're going to eat like this, you're going to sit like this, you're going to say please and thank you, you're going to respect me, you're going to wear this, you're going to do this, go to piano, then to dodgeball, then to whatever activities you put your kids in. Dodgeball, clearly I'm in jiu-jitsu class in my head. And so I think from a young age, children who can have the self-efficacy to control their own, wants at least. Well, I want to play with this toy and you're not letting me play with this toy, or I want to explore this and you're not letting me. Instead of saying, how can we safely do this? Children naturally feel controlled. And as they get older, they want to, for lack of a better word, and I feel like this is a little too general, but rebel, or at least find themselves. And for those who don't, they end up going, well, if I can't find myself, I'm going to control like I was controlled, because that's what adults do. And I think that's where the confusion is that as an adult or a parent, I don't want to control my child. I don't want to determine their future, their successes. That's their journey and their journey alone. And I think part of the mindful parenting that I hope to explore and share with others is the idea that our children are sovereign human beings who have come through us, not for us, not for our love or our want to live vicariously through them, but to exist within us. And if anything that our kids are for us, it's a mirror and a reflection for all the trauma and discomfort and bad habits that we still carry. Mm-hmm. So really, I believe that our children can be healing forces in the generational issues that we've taken on from our parents. And unless we choose to bring awareness to that alone and open our ideas to, wow, maybe my kid is really showing me that I'm a little too obsessed with what they wear every day, or that food really shouldn't be this big of a battle. And if I just give them 10 options of healthy foods in our, fridge or on the table, then I wouldn't be controlling what they eat of everything. There is no option for, a terribly crazy, unhealthy option. I don't want to even identify one, because I don't want a parent to feel like, well, I feed my kid that, so I'm bad. That's not what I'm implying. But if, some parents I know say, my child will only eat, the fried foods with the cheese-filled this or the sugary dipped that. And it's like, but what if those aren't even options in the household? What if that wasn't ever exposed to them? Then the food fight doesn't exist. You put out great options. They choose what they want to eat. You allow them some sovereignty in the food and ingestion department, and you kind of just back up. Then there's no concern. They learn to navigate good food and their body and their digestion themselves. It's to me, a win-win. Set them up in an environment in which they can't fail.
No, that's great. What would you tell the parent that missed the boat, so to speak, at first and didn't start out like that, but now wants to become more mindfulness with, for example, the eating, and they did introduce some kind of bad choices or less than great choices? How would they transition or change that?
Good question. So even adults, I think, have a slight taste or addictive nature to foods. Foods are so chemically filled that they become exciting into our palates to a point of no return, right? So when we're not dealing with some of these processed foods that give us a literal chemical reaction of excitement from it, there's a bit of a withdrawal period. And again, I believe it begins with first a conversation. Hey, mommy or daddy really thought this was a healthy option for us. And I'm realizing, as I'm doing my research and learning from the doctor or, whatever authority figure you think will resonate with your child, we're learning that this is actually not that good for our body. And we want to make a change as a whole family to try to eat differently. We're going to do this together because obviously it can't be the parent eating the burgers and the French fries that are deeply fried. Again, there I just named some things that I even eat, so they're not that bad, guys, I promise. But not together, but, whatever. And so you first make it a conversation. Even for a 4-year-old, they will comprehend the idea that you are trying to do better and be better, and that you make mistakes. I think that's part of the process. As you said, I made the mistake of thinking that this was a healthy food for a long time, and I chose to give it to our family. I'm choosing to now do something different. It shows the child and themselves that every day we can start and do something different. You are not held to the certain mindset because you've been doing it for so long. And some kids think that because that's the way you've always been or that's how they have to be, there is no change. But if you can help them realize that every day you can reset, reboot, try again.
Great. I love that.
I
love that. It gives the freedom, right? It gives you freedom to be imperfect and say, it's okay to be imperfect, and we can change directions, change our minds at any time. We're not set into those rigid rules that we've always done.
Yeah, I think parents fear showing that vulnerable side or that non-perfection side, mainly because they're used to being right. They want to always be right, and they fear that if the child sees the bend of that they'll lose their authoritarian ability, I suppose. Mm-hmm. And I've found with my children specifically, of course, I am very clear on, I don't know the answer to that. There are ways we can go find out, or I'll say, in my experience, I've done this, but let's see how that experience will be for you. For instance, in spicy foods, and I hate to keep it to food, even though I love food. I always say I put spices on my food. Like, I believe in certain spicy things, like jalapenos. And she goes, Mom, but those are spicy. And I was like, yeah, they are. She goes, am I going to like it? And I was like, there's only one way to find out, to try it. It might burn your mouth. Right. That's the truth. But it also might be incredibly satisfying. My mother always told me growing up, you can't have this. This is spicy. And now that I'm an adult, I'm like, I'm pretty sure that was her code for you can't have this food because it's not really for kids. I shouldn't be eating it either, but I can't control myself. So I'll just tell you it's too spicy and you won't eat it. And it works on my kids too. So
that's funny.
Funny.
So along with the parental control, I think some parents fear giving up some of that control and not being very dominant and controlling because they're afraid of what will happen and they're afraid of what they'll look like to those around them. If you're in a store and your kid's going crazy and not behaving very well, how's that reflect on me and that kind of thing. Sure. So they get very directive and try to these narrow parameters and say you need to act like this at all times instead of letting them kind of explore and find their way. And on the other hand of that, though, Victoria, or the other side of that, some would argue that, kids do need parameters, though, and makes them feel secure to know that. So what do you say to that?
Let me be very clear. As open and sovereign as I want my children to be, I'm also the queen of boundaries, period. Okay. I believe boundaries are the highest form of love. I believe the minute you tell somebody, this is my line, here's where it is, if you want to stay on that side, that would be a pure indicator of how much you respect us, period. And I think children need to know, too, where is it okay for me to cross this? Where am I going too far? And what's a healthy thing for people? So we teach, physical boundaries. We teach emotional boundaries. We teach psychological boundaries. And it's heavy, but it goes back to control. So the control idea for me in regards to the aspect of you're talking about like let's say in a toy store, a children wants a toy. A parent goes, great, we came here for a gift for someone else, but you want one for you. Child freaks out on the floor, raging.
Right.
Right. Well, it makes sense. Their primal lizard brain comes out and is like, oh my gosh, this is what I want. They want what they want when they want. And the hard part is parents meet that with control or resistance instead of, I know, sometimes I want things too that I can't have. And you know what? That is frustrating. And it sounds crazy because we've never been validated in our entire life. And for generations, we've been told to be, speak when spoken to and don't cry because those are big feelings and big feelings aren't allowed here. But the truth is, the sooner you validate a human's feelings, and this isn't just for kids, this is for adults, specifically in relationships. And the minute you validate someone's feelings, they feel heard. Mm-hmm. And it's not until they feel heard that they can move to the next step and actually go to the healing or the connecting. And so when it comes to that kid having a tantrum, I would just come down to my knees and say, hey, I know you really like that Barbie doll. It's a really good Barbie doll. And, clearly it makes you really happy. I have an idea. Why don't we take a picture of this Barbie doll and let's put it on a list of things that we want. And that, when the time comes to actually get something, we'll go through the list and this will be a reminder that this is something that was really important to you. So you're validating that their feelings mm-hmm. are in fact valid because they care about something. That's all that matters. Yes. And then B, you're saying, I recognize it's important to you and I'm willing to write this down and make efforts to revisit this idea again.
That's a wonderful way to approach it. And it doesn't sound, you said might sound like crazy. It doesn't sound crazy to me because, I'm kind of into emotional intelligence and motivational interviewing, things like that. So it totally resonates with me. You go from kind of butting heads and being against them to, or, on opposing sides to, validating, like you said, and being on the same side. Yeah, I can totally appreciate where you're coming from. And then the extra steps you took after that. Beautiful. Love that.
Yeah, thank you. And at the end of the day, you have to decide, how do I want to communicate to this child to then teach them when other people have big feelings around them that they can communicate in the same way? Because otherwise it's reactivity to reactivity to reactivity. Mm-hmm. And that's what happens is the parent is triggered because they have unresolved trauma of lack of control in their life. So they're going to try to control this child. In addition to that, they've got layered on their shame. I have shame that I'm not being a good parent because everyone in the store is now looking at me because I have a raging child on the floor. So it's such a multifaceted moment that could be either a moment of great opportunity and growth and transformation or a continual reactivity and really cementing of the belief system of I am in control, I am the parent, you are below me, you do what I say, how I say, you feel how I say, when I say. And that's the hard part is parents don't realize that sometimes, although intentions are absolutely pure, their want for their child to stop crying, to be nice, or to control these emotions is also negating and controlling feelings. And we all know that we can't control how we feel about something. We just control how we react. And that comes after you've processed those feelings. And we're trying to skip to the next step with them and control, but they haven't even processed, yet alone exuded. And yeah,
very
that's
true.
what I feel about that.
Great thoughts. Great insight, Victoria. Let's talk a little bit about My Kind of Mama. We touched on it. Let's talk about that. But first, how did you becoming a parent change your life? What was the biggest impact?
This might be a long answer, Marty. I warn you now.
Try to sum it up a little bit.
Okay. So becoming a parent for me was a shift in consciousness and awareness to my own control and identity of who I was, and attachment to who I was. I was a professional dancer, model, actress. I did everything in the entertainment industry for about 12, 15 years. And I was consumed by the jobs that I did and the labels I received and the accolades, and was constantly trying to improve on that. And the minute I became a mother, I realized that nobody commends you for doing a good job at raising a child, or for those late night diaper changes, or for surviving these, late night episodes of emotional or big feelings. No one commends you for these things. And I was used to, for lack of better phrases, I was used to an applause. I used to, oh, that was a good job. And we were raised in a good job society. So we expect to be, have our actions confirmed by, praise. And I realized quickly, not only did I not receive that, but if anything, I was receiving extreme amounts of judgment, expectations and impositions on how I should raise my children because convention, family tradition, what a female's role is in both the part of mothering, but also now in the family unit, how it shifts. Before I was a equal income breadwinner to the family, and then I became, what some would feel is inferior or a non-contributing factor to the home unit. And that was jarring for me because my mother, when I was young, always told me, make your own money, be your own person. You may never find love. You may never get married. Don't depend on anyone else. And I took that to heart. I said, okay, you might be right. So I never worried about someone taking care of me. I was always taking care of myself. And then I had to take care of someone else. And I said, holy shoot, I need someone to help take care of me. It was so hard, but it wasn't just, hard. It's hard. You get it. I mean, parents get it. Every morning you're felt like, am I doing this right? Am I going to have time to do all the things that need to get done? And inevitably the laundry doesn't get done. The dishes don't get done. The house is not perfect, despite what we want as humans is to have, things put together. And having a child, especially in the early ages, just doesn't account for that unless you have a lot of hired help, which we didn't in the beginning. We had family, and that caused even more friction. So the control is highly prevalent in our family. The tradition is so huge on the archaic ideals of where the woman sits and what that should be done. And I have to tell you, my kind of mama was born, although very difficult for me to go through, but was born because of that. So while I have a lot of, a lot of therapy sessions went towards that, I definitely had a lot of beauty come out of it. And that is now that I can help other women see what convention feels and forces on them. And I can help them find their intuitive nature and help them listen to their inner voice and change the way their inner voice speaks to them in ways that I think we all need to hear. Self-love, not just from ourselves, but from the inner child that didn't believe in ourselves before. So my kind of mama is truly my wish of what I wish I had those first early years, and the struggle against, for me, it was a lot of family ideals, and it was a lot of convention and expectations. And for others, it could be a myriad of other things. And so my hope is that it can inspire a woman to be a renegade in her life and finally live it how she wants to live instead of for everyone else.
Mm. And I'm sure it does. I'm sure it already has inspired many to live their own path and their own truth and to have permission, to go another way when they feel like it. Yeah.
That's it. Permission. That's half my phone call is giving them permission.
Yeah. Let's change gears just for a second and talk a little bit about your background. You were, like you said, a former professional dancer, model, actress, a lot of different things. So where'd you grow up and how did you get into dancing in some of the other arenas?
Sure. I moved around 12 times before I was even 12 years old. So I was used to change. And so I'm like a chameleon. I adapt to different locations. But then I ended in La Cañada around fourth grade and was raised there, La Cañada, California. It's right near Pasadena, NASA, JPL over there. And I went to school there. I did everything you could imagine in school. I was, captain of the basketball team, head cheerleader, student body, everything. And I was president of the drama class. I just wanted to be involved. I wanted to do something. I spent every waking moment doing something. And when I graduated, I went to Cal State Long Beach and attempted to still do everything. And I realized, it's a little harder to do that in college. And I started to get my degree in computer science while I took dance classes on the low, just on, electives, which, by the way, that doesn't help you graduate earlier. Don't do electives outside of your focus if you don't intend to graduate that way. So I began actually because back in the day, Craigslist has always been creepy, I suppose, but back in the day, a lot of these agencies would put out dance auditions on Craigslist, and I saw an audition on Craigslist while I'm in my computer science class typing away. And I went to the audition. Apparently I booked it, got an agent, got everything just fell into place. But then I was also got an internship with Boeing. And so like literally in the same 2 days, I got the internship with Boeing, a paid internship with a guaranteed job after I graduate. And then like literally less than 48 hours later, I was given an opportunity to fly and tour the world with Kelly Rowland at the time. And I sat there and I was like, I gotta do this. I can't say no.
Right.
That's where my heart is. So I left and I told Boeing no. And I was like, sorry, bye. And I took off and I started, that was the beginning of my career. I still attempted to, stay in school while I traveled. And that was like the prerequisite. My parents said, you can do whatever you want as long as you continue school. And I'm like, haha, sure. And I went and I started touring. I started auditioning for feature films and television. And I really took on the dance industry at the time by storm. And I was lucky because I was, an avid computer person, that I understood Photoshop, I understood Final Cut and Adobe, all these different programs that helped me do things in my, acting and dancing world so easily, whereas most other dancers would have had to hire out for such things. And I was able to kind of handle the business side of it as well as the dance side. So if there's one thing that I could say for anyone who ever pursues that, it's that having a small jack of all trades mentality and being able to do a lot more for yourself without hiring out was beneficial to me at the time. And it allowed for my business side of it to flourish. And I did. I started dancing, and my biggest high time was when I toured with Rihanna. I toured the world with her for almost 2 years. And that's actually when I met my husband, Hidon. And he met me like right before I left for tour. And I remember him coming to my goodbye dinner. And then I left, and I came back 2 weeks later. He's like, wait, I thought you were leaving on tour. I said, oh yeah, but we come back every so often. And he's like, oh, okay, thanks. He thought I was like leaving for 2 years straight.
That's funny.
So he was like, this is so weird. Why are you here right now? And so then we started our whole relationship on tour, and it was kind of the biggest gift in the world, because tour life can be pretty insane. It could be really interesting for, single people. It's like very much like getting stuck on an island with the same 20 people, only you get to travel to different islands every other night. And I was lucky to have him as a rock and a person of moral guidance and compass throughout the process, going, oh my gosh, is this okay? What does that mean? Why is this happening? And it was interesting for him, and he got to tour with us. And so, you could ask him stories later about that, but he definitely ended up in one of our bus bunks, and he sleep in like a coffin-sized bed, and he had to share that with me, and he was like, "This will never happen again."
Oh, I bet. So I'm glad you got into this, because I was going to say, I asked Eve how she met Henner, so I definitely had to ask you, how you met Hidon. So I'm glad you're getting into that. So what would you say stands out as the first thing you noticed, or the main thing that stands out about when you first met Hidon?
Good question. When I first met him, I would say this is going to sound interesting, because unless you know him, you don't know what this even means. But if you know Hidon, he has ability to say like one line, and it's like the heaviest load of information in like one thing, and it's like an emotional whatever, and he just delivers these heavy set sentences. And I was just like, holy moly, what does that mean? What? And so for me, my impression of him was I could imagine confidence. Like there was for sure a sense of him that was so content with who he was, which is hard to find. Most men that I was interacting with in the entertainment industry, because they were like me, were constantly, am I good enough? Or is that enough? I'm not sure. And he was just like, I'm enough, period. Like it wasn't like ego. It wasn't like egotistical by any means. It was just, I love who I am. I love what I do. And that's it. And that was incredibly attractive. I was like,
yeah.
oh, who are you?
Yeah, that's very cool. That's very cool. Because like you said, well, in most of our society, and especially in the world you were in at that time, there's so much kind of insecurity and need to prove ourselves and all that. And, we've all, or most of us have suffered with that, of course, at one time or another. But to have some presence that you're around that just seems totally content with who and where they are.
Content. Yeah, that's what it is. He is. And, additionally, he speaks with a slight philosopher mind, which I'm a big nerd at heart, and I'm a sucker for an intellectual conversation. And I grew up, I went to college for computer science, and I would sit in a room of like 30 guys going, oh my gosh, like I'm in heaven. They're all nerds and I love it. But the funniest part is they were all too scared to talk to me because here I am, this outgoing female, like, hey, how's it going? And they're like, right. Oh my God, who's speaking?
That's too funny.
So yeah, I didn't get much of that. I'm like, anybody? Bueller? Nobody? Okay. But luckily I found a guy who has both the confidence and the philosophical mindset.
That's cool. It appears that you guys really have such a great and complementary relationship and are really going through life, in a very healthy and mutually respectful way. So love to see examples of that.
Oh, very cool. Thank you. And that's not to say that we don't fight. Just let me be really clear.
Yeah, well, nobody's perfect, right?
Right. Well, and it's not even about perfection. It's about realness. Like, we live in a real way, but when we do fight, we really take care with each other's emotional situation and our communication. We try to be impeccable with our words. And there's a really awesome book, Marty, that I love called Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. And he talks about how the sentence structure in which we build our words and our statements to people can either be seen as attacks or, taking ownership of how we feel. And like you said, most television shows are scripting to attack. And so we build our words off of that as well. And I found that once I read this book, I'm like, we're doing this all wrong. How we communicate really gets different results. And I'm really lucky that he is willing to open his mind to other ways of even just sentence structuring a sentence, it's amazing.
Yes, he is. I mean, when I said nobody's perfect, I just, to be very complimentary of him, but not put him on a pedestal as this, can't ever do wrong kind of person. He's human like all of us, but it says a lot about him to be able to be open to new ideas and everything. Like, you read a book and you say, hey, we need to look at this. And so, it's the wise man that will listen to that and explore different things. But, words do matter. And books like that really help. Some people aren't as into more like visual or kinesthetic and aren't so auditory. And the ones that are more auditory dominant, I think, just get that easier, the importance of words and what words you want to choose. But everybody can really learn a lot from, how you say it, and not tone and specific words really does have a major impact on what you're saying. A lot of times people would be more receptive to the message if how it was delivered was different,
There's a great saying that I look at him and I'm like, do you want to be right or do you want to be heard?
Excellent.
Where are we going with this?
Yes, very cool. That's
so
very cool.
I'm with you on that completely.
And I've learned, because, again, we can all get triggered from our old baggage and things and get into, quote, fighting, when really that wasn't what we wanted. Or it can come across, a lot harsher than we intended. But I've learned to kind of stop and reset, sometimes, not always, in the middle of things before it gets further, and then have to come back and say, sorry, I said it like that or whatever.
You're talking about what comes up for us and how that creates a conversation in a different realm. Hedon and I speak a lot about the idea that trauma that is not transformed is trauma transferred, right? Mm-hmm. So if we have these inner workings that are constantly coming up as, I'll call them themes of continual fights. And most couples experience this. And it's the same thing. We're fighting about the same thing, but just slightly different. Like this time you took out the trash, but you didn't put the bag in. This time, like different funny things that add up. And what I realize is that it's coming from an inner trauma that hasn't been met. So now Hedon and I can look at each other and we say, like, where is this coming from? How can we heal that so that this no longer triggers us? And we're at least in a relationship where we can explore that safely instead of saying, you keep doing this thing and accusatorily, bashing heads. Mm-hmm. We really sit there and I go, okay, where is this coming from? Like, you're not usually this upset about trash. Let's be honest. Like, there is something there. And again, he first has to be heard and validated, and then we explore it. We go, okay, so obviously, and I'm giving examples here. This isn't a real thing. He takes out the trash, and I do too, just fine. But
right.
just to be clear, no drama out there on that.
Right.
Many other things, but not that. It's the idea that, like, okay, so it's not the trash. What is it? How can we explore it? Yeah, it's pretty basic for us, but it's hard. It takes work and it takes time. And sometimes he's exhausted and he doesn't want to do it. And sometimes I'm overwhelmed and I'm like, I can't cater to this right now. And that's the hard part. If we don't take time to transform it, the trauma will persist.
Well, see, and that's a big thing right there, just the awareness. A lot of times we're fighting just because we're tired, and maybe you didn't sleep as well, or maybe you've been running too much on it, or you let your blood sugar get too low, whatever it may be that affects your mood. Can affect that interaction. So sometimes it's just being aware. Man, I'm just like tired and I'm grouchy, instead of it being a legitimate something we need to be discussing or whatever.
Well, and Marty, think about this for a second. You are a grown adult with full ability to control your emotions and your cognitive abilities to understand what's rushing through you emotionally. Now reframe that back to a 4-year-old who doesn't have that, because you're not fully, your whole brain isn't fully grown until 25, they say. So a 4-year-old has these same big emotions, these same big wants to outburst, and instead of coaching them through it, or at least being an open container for them to just pour into you with all the worries they have in the world, we stuff them. We don't talk. You can't feel. You can't do anything. Like, we literally stuff them and ask them not to speak, or don't cry right now. Stop talking. Stop yelling. Stop feeling. Like, that's what we do with children. And yet we as adults, sometimes like you said it, I'm just in a bad mood. I'm just tired. We have to give kids the ability to have those same real moments. You're in a bad mood. I get it. Can you go be in a bad mood in your room so that, we don't hurt the kids that are over to play date? Like, there are systems in place in which we can be there for them and allow them the freedom of expression and real emotions to come out without control, without manipulation and coercion,
So true. So true. So let's talk about your involvement in jiu-jitsu for a moment. I assume that you got, quote, led to or exposed to jiu-jitsu by Hiron. So
yes, and I did not know about it before.
Okay, and you're very active in jiu-jitsu, and especially in the Women's Empowered program. So tell us a little about what that journey's been like for you, and what you get out of being a part of that.
Yeah, I found my love for it late, not because it wasn't amazing at first bite, but because I wasn't in a place to receive the calling, so to speak. And this is also why I tell many husbands who come up to me, oh man, how can I get my wife to train? And I say, stop asking her, because that they will, you can take the horse to the water, but you can't shove his face to drink. Like, he's got to do it himself. And I feel that way about kids. I feel that way about women or men of any walk of life who come to jiu-jitsu. They will come when the calling is there. They will embrace it when they feel connected to it. And if they have an aversion to it, or if they're not, there is no need to force. And luckily, Hidon took a very passive approach to it, and it's what worked for us. And there were definitely moments where I was like, why aren't you more persistent about me doing this? And he's like, what's happening right now? But I did. I came in later. I had, a lot of physical background with dance. And at first, jiu-jitsu felt a little slow for me. You learned what would be considered a count of 8 in dance over an hour in jiu-jitsu. And I would learn that about 50 counts of 8 over an hour. So it's like, imagine learning 50 moves in 1 hour. It would be an impossibility to anyone else but a dancer. And so for me, it felt incredibly slow at first. And then I realized once you start going with someone else, you're like, oh, this is why you have to go slow at first. And it all started to make sense. And then, of course, I started to tap into what is now known as a Me Too movement, or a lot of my female experiences throughout life and ways in which I experienced violence against women, both emotionally, physically, and psychologically. And I realized how much I needed jiu-jitsu, not just physically, but the psychological aspect. And, Eve and Henner have nurtured this Women Empowered program beyond, it's how it started. And I'm lucky to be on that train with them and be able to share this and add to it from the, psychological aspect even more in ways that I don't think any other self-defense program does. And I believe a lot of the women come to my class. I teach it in Beverly Hills on Saturdays at 10:30 a.m. And those women, we start the entire class in a circle. There's like 25 of us, and we sit in a circle, and half of it is just talking about things we've been through, ways to overcome, things we fear, ideas that we thought were one way and are shifting towards others, learning boundaries, being able to speak up for ourselves, building inner confidence, and honestly just playing with the idea that we are actually worth defending, because self-worth is a huge thing that gets, challenged for us. And just last night I was talking to Hidon about how I just want to write down all of my experiences of violence against women, specifically in the entertainment industry, but, even more so just even as a child from when I was, fourth grade, it began probably earlier than that. And I don't think other people realize how this affects people. And it can be such a healing moment for some of these women in this class. We spend so much time want to heal than teaching techniques and implementing, what are the not proper, but what are the right areas in which we would pull out these techniques or these psychological ideas.
That's really great. And it just shows how big jiu-jitsu is, and that it goes so far beyond just moves and that kind of level. And someone like you that can be present with other people and broaden it and give it so much more meaning. Because, it's different for everybody, their journey with jiu-jitsu and their journey in life. So being able to, you're obviously making an impact because of who you are and how you've chosen to be and live your life. And you've let it spread in so many different kind of directions. Pretty much everything you touch, it sounds like, which is very cool. I got to say,
thank you.
You're very welcome. I got to talk about the first time I met you.
Oh, uh-oh.
It's
what did I do?
It's no crazy story or anything like that. No. It just stands out in my mind. It just stands out in my mind because, I'll tell you. So it was out in the ICP, Instructor Certification Program in 2011 during the Sunday activity, which is at the racetrack, like the go-kart.
Oh, man.
Place. Yeah. So it was no big thing. It's just I met you then, and you just really struck me as an incredibly friendly person. And then having been around you many times after at different times, in Destin immersion camp, several different places, different times, it's all just confirmed to me that you're one of the most friendly, down-to-earth, loving, and real people I've met. So I just want to say thank you.
Oh my gosh, Marty.
And also anybody that uses the term holy moly is definitely pretty cool, which you did a while ago. So,
yeah, I use holy moly.
That's funny. I love it. I haven't heard that in a long time. So going back to bringing back...
I'm a mom now.
Bringing it back to the book, Kip and the Magical Belt, is available today. Anything else you want to add to that? What about the illustrations? Who did that? And any closing thoughts about that? As well as anybody you want to thank or shout out to?
Oh my gosh, that'll take forever. But yes, let me begin at the beginning. So what I would love to say about Kip and the Magical Belt is kind of the journey as not only just to how it was written, but how it came to fruition was purely because as a parent, I can really relate to others in that, first, we don't have a television in our home. We choose to be TV free for many reasons that we don't have to dive into right now, but we enjoy books. I love books. When I was pregnant, I read a book a week. And so when my kids were born, I loved to read to them. They loved to read themselves. And I found very little on the topic of bullying, of mean words, of things. And my daughter at 2 years old, it's so young, was playing outside at a jiu-jitsu class that we were visiting. And two other little girls who were 4 and maybe 5 years old came up to her out of nowhere and was like, "You can't play with us." And I was like, oh, wow, this is already happening. And, a 2-year-old like, meh, I don't know, I don't play, whatever she was said at the time. And the girls just persisted, nope, can't play with us, and ran away. And it was very sassy. And again, not incredibly, like, she didn't start to physically hurt her, but I was like, wow, the conversation of what it means to own your body, own yourself, and how bullies work needs to start. It needs to start now. And so I would definitely read a lot of books, and I found none implemented physical, like, bullying prevention by any means, and very few implemented any emotional connection to what's happening to you. Why are you feeling this way? Why is this happening? And I was like, oh my gosh, this needs to happen. And so I took it on, and I didn't know how it would end, but I love my husband because he believed in me the whole time. And so if I were to thank someone, he would be the one. And my kids bring out the best in it. And the book itself, I know some are like, oh my gosh, spoiler alert, he does get into a physical altercation with the bully, and he does use jiu-jitsu to defend himself. But it might be a little hard for some parents to say this, because I know that some parents go, well, this will never happen to my kid. It's the same reason why women don't learn self-defense. This won't happen to me. I frequent, high trafficked areas. I'm always with my, family, and I feel safe, or fill in the blank. They think it won't happen to them. But kids are just exposed to different humans with different backgrounds, with different issues. And so it's possible for anyone to be exposed to a bully. If they're in the workplace, they are in, your education system, they're in every aspect of life. So I don't think that bullying is just for children, and young children who do bully or have been bullied can grow up to then be a bully themselves. And so I'm hoping with the book, not just in the parenting discussion, but throughout it, there are symbols of growth and mentality. So I almost want to read you, like, one of my favorite lines from the book is, or double lines. And I'll read you maybe 2 pages. So once the bully gets on him, he says, his eyes opened wide and his temper burned brighter. He tried getting out, but I only held tighter. I controlled him without ever throwing a punch, not trying to hurt him. I just want my lunch. He could tell I was serious and surprised that I won. When he finally cooled down, I asked, are we done? I helped him up and said while dusting myself off, I don't want to hurt you. I just want you to stop. So it's giving children also the verbal sentencing, like, they don't know what to say to a bully. Stop hitting me. Great. Now what are they going to do about it? But it's like, no, I don't want to hurt you. I need you to stop. Please keep a distance. And it's, if we equip them with the words and also the physical ability and the permission to defend themselves, I feel like we can make big strides on our children's confidence and abilities to survive a lifelong of bullying.
Mm-hmm. I agree completely. It's beautiful. Instead of just giving one little part, the physical, or some words to say, put it all together in a whole package, and you're a lot more likely to really empower somebody. So very good.
Yeah.
Very good. You got to talk about the bear. There's an option to order the bear. I think it's Bubba the bear.
Oh my gosh, yes. So let me just real quick, I forgot to say, because you did ask it. My book was illustrated by Steve Bermundo. He is a friend of mine who was a former dancer, or was still dancing actually. He's a dancer as well. And I would watch him sketch, and I fell in love with his sketches, and I asked him to do just a jiu-jitsu kid, like a logo almost for Hidon. And as that progressed, it turned into a book. But that's who did it.
Very
He's
nice.
Incredibly talented, and I hope you see that in his illustrations. They are fantastic. But in that, he drew, in the story, the belt comes to life and tells Kip, practice on your bear over there. I named him Bubba the Bear after our Bubba doll for, adults to train with.
That's
perfectly transfers. And so Bubba the Bear, he does all these jiu-jitsu moves, and I said, we have to do a Bubba the Bear for kids. And he helped, so much of the mentality behind it. I found early on, like a yoga kind of bear that could be manipulated into different forms. So I said, I got to get this. I called everyone worldwide, and I found a company that basically puts in a fully jointed skeleton. Like the joints are like a half inch apart. So literally the iterations of the joints could be so precise. Wow. And they put it into this bear, and the bear looks very much like the bear in the book. And so I said, this is it. This is what kids will be doing with the bear. And it's actually, Hidon's putting out a video with him doing moves with the bear with the kids.
That's wonderful.
So yeah,
and it's pretty big.
That one, 'cause that's really cute.
And Bubba's pretty big. He's not just some little tiny stuffed animal bear. He's I saw a picture of him with your daughters on the website, and up against them, he's pretty big.
Yeah, he runs about 31 inches. And yeah, next to my children, he's taller than my 2.5-year-old, but shorter than my 4.5-year-old. But my 4.5-year-old is really tall for a 4.5-year-old. So our goal was that the average 4-year-old could be the same height. But we've had, 10-year-olds be like, give me that bear. And I was like, so hard. They love it. There's things that you can do with a bear that you don't feel comfortable doing with another kid, like pushing your hands on their face when you wrap around and do an arm lock. Like it's interesting.
Right.
Like they feel free to practice this with confidence. It's awesome.
That's very cool.
Awesome.
Very cool. Love it. All right. And summing up, anything that we haven't touched upon that you would like to put out there?
No, well, just that where they can get it. They can get the book and the bear are for sale as a set at a discounted price of $79.95 for the bear, 31-inch bear, and a book at magicalbelt.com. The book is also available by itself for $24.95 on my website and on Amazon. So if you're really into that 2-day free shipping, you can do that. But
that's what
it's up to you.
I pre-ordered mine on Amazon, so cool.
Well, thank you so much for your support,
of
Marty.
Course, absolutely. All right. Well, listen, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, and you're doing great things.
Thanks.
So I appreciate it, and I respect and admire you and the impact you're making on people, and that you're living your truth. So thank you so much for the example you're setting and for the impact you're making.
Thank you so much, Marty, for just sharing that appreciation. We don't get to hear it very often, and we're too busy working, and maybe people don't feel like they need to say it sometimes. So I have to tell you, those words mean a lot more than you think they do. And they hit really hard to my heart. So thank you. And I appreciate your time and even your interest in talking to me. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I wish you a long, healthy, happy life and continued success and happiness.
Thanks, Marty. You too.
All right. Take care.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, really enjoyed interviewing Victoria. As I said before, she's such a genuine, loving, insightful, and interesting person. So really enjoyed that. So show her some love. Go out and get this book and let it serve as a vehicle to connect with your children and educate them about bullying and how they can deal with it. Okay, up next is the Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment. Time now for the Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment. And this thought actually comes from Victoria's Instagram. You are being presented with a choice: evolve or remain. If you choose to remain unchanged, you will be presented with the same challenges, the same routine, the same storms, the same situations, until you learn from them. Until you love yourself enough to say no more. Until you choose change. If you choose to evolve, you will connect with the strength within you. You will explore what lies outside the comfort zone. You will awaken to love. You will become. You will be. You have everything you need. Choose to evolve. Choose love. Very nice. And for once, I have nothing to add to that thought. So going through your day, your week, your month, I invite you to keep this in mind. And let it sink in and let it drive you. Let it drive and motivate your actions. And I think by doing so, you'll be a much healthier and happier person. And that's going to do it for this edition of the show. As always, I thank you for listening. Hope you're enjoying the show. If you feel like you're benefiting from the show and want to show your support, you can support us on our Patreon page and a link in the show notes. Please like and follow us on social media and help us spread the word by reposting our posts and telling others about the show. You can leave comments on the website at www.graciejujitsurocks.com. You can also go to iTunes and leave comments as well as rate the show, and we would appreciate a 5-star rating, which helps us with our standing in iTunes. You can also leave comments on our YouTube channel. If you have suggestions for the show, please don't hesitate to give those. We always like feedback and suggestions. Okay, that's going to do it. So until next time, this is Marty Josie, and I'll see you on the mat.